The World Skeptics Congress, Paranormal, Supernatural, Fringe Science, Pseudoscience, and How It Really Is. Berlin welcomes you.
We're skeptically interrogating.
Well, I presume that everybody in the room here would consider themselves to be critical thinkers, defenders of science, promoters of rationality, skeptics. We can apply various labels to ourselves, but I suspect that few of us, with the notable exception of James Randi, who's here somewhere, have had our feet held to the fire because of what we've been doing to promote rationality. Such a person is here tonight. We're going to honor him tonight. Someone who has been raked through the coals because of his attempts to bring some sense to discussions of chiropractic. Talk about Simon Singh, who was sued in libel court and lost first time around for having written this outrageous, hyperbolic statement. Let me read it to you. In part, the British Chiropractic Association claims that their members can help treat children with colic, sleeping and feeding problems, frequent ear infections, asthma, and prolonged crying, even though there's not a jot of evidence. This organization is the respectable face of the chiropractic profession, and yet it happily promotes bogus treatments. At any rate, that led to a libel suit, and Simon Singh lost, the first round at least, with, I don't know the exact financial consequences, but I'm sure it was not a very pretty sight. So he fought on. First of all, he fought on because he didn't want to ultimately lose if there were other battles that we fought. But secondly, had he given up, the libel chill would have stopped anybody, at least in England, from saying anything critical about anyone who might be ready to sue. So he fought on. A whole number of supporters, something like 20,000 people, I think, signed on to help fight for the repeal and at least the improvement, the change of the libel laws. Something I found particularly humorous was that Simon and his colleagues discovered that although in libel court, the chiropractors didn't have to prove that what they did wasn't bogus, it turns out that with the Advertising Standards Council, you actually have to show that what you advertise works. And so Simon and his colleagues started launching an investigation of the claims the chiropractors were making on their web pages. And before very long, as I understand it, a quarter of the chiropractors in England were being charged under the Advertising Standards Council rules, and they were quickly pulling down their websites. So a nice victory in that sense. At any rate, this went to a court of appeal, and Simon Singh was victorious, although I hesitate to know what financial price victory goes for these days, given the cost of legal assistance. At any rate, this by itself would probably be enough justification for the award that we're going to be presenting tonight, but it's really just the icing on the cake. So now let me talk about the cake. Simon Singh is a PhD in theoretical particle physics from Cambridge University. After getting his PhD, he joined the science department at the BBC and produced and directed a number of the science documentaries that we've seen, some of them in North America. Many of them, I guess, have never crossed the waters, but they have been garnering all kinds of praise as models of scientific scrutiny and how to teach people to think critically about things. He has written a number of books, and I like the titles of these books. In fact, the first one, I really enjoy this title. It's called Fermat's Last Theorem. That by itself isn't that spectacular title, but I like the subtitle, The Story of a Riddle that confounded the world's greatest minds for 358 years. He wrote a book called The Code Book, The Secret History of Codes and Code Breaking. Another one, The Big Bang. And then with Professor Ernst, Trick or Treatment, Alternative Medicine on Trial. So these are amongst his writings. He has been honored by other people other than us. He has an honorary degree from the University of the West of England, one from Southampton University, one from the University of London, and one I hesitate to pronounce this. I'm not sure whether it's Loughborough or Loughborough. Pardon me? Loughborough, sorry. It looked like laugh to me, but Loughborough University. I don't know if it's just me, but is anyone else here starting to feel a little bit inadequate as I go through this list? And then, get this, for service to science, I'm trying to read my own writing here, science, technology, and engineering, and education and science communication, he was made a member of the Order of the British Empire. And if that isn't enough, he's a fellow of CSI. So because he's a great communicator, he's a champion of science par excellence, tireless promoter of critical thinking. In recognition of all of this, I have the pleasure and the honor of presenting on behalf of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry our highest award, the In Praise of Reason Award. I just want to read what it says. It says, the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry in Praise of Reason Award presented to Simon Singh in recognition of his distinguished contribution to the use of critical inquiry, scientific evidence, and reason in evaluating claims to knowledge. So,
thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim, and it's a genuine honour and a real privilege to be here. And I'll explain why in this talk, and I'll race through it very quickly because Jim's covered some of these points already, and some of you know the story, some of you have been part of this story. But when I last spoke in Europe at one of these conferences, I think it was a European Skeptics conference, it was in Hungary just a couple of years ago, and I talked a bit about this Libel case, and I talked about the book that I'd written with Edzard, and here's the book, Trickle Treatment, about alternative medicine, here's Edzard, and the Libel case wasn't about the book. The Libel case was about an article I'd written. You know, when you write a book, you want people to read it, so you promote it, you give interviews, you write articles. So I'd written this article about chiropractic, and there was this critical phrase at the end, which you've just heard about, where I criticised chiropractors and the British Chiropractic Association for promoting ear infections, asthma and colic. And I talked all about this last time when I was here in Hungary. And it was a really miserable libel case. I've met other people here today who've been involved in libel battles, the Dutch Society of Quackery, against quackery, sorry. Have been involved in these battles. There was a German lawyer here who's fought battles and so on, and James Randi himself. So, you know, these things happen and they're miserable and they're tough. And I won't go through the case again because you've just heard a very good summary of it. But these were the positive things that came out of it. And as Jim mentioned, when you get involved in libel, you do make enemies. But you also make some very good friends, and you realize who your friends are. Because there was Edzard for a start, Edzard Ernst, who co-authored this book with me and who backed me to the hilt when I was up against the wall. James Randi, I remember an email from him where he said, look, we've got your back. If you're being sued for libel, we're going to be there. The Australian Skeptics broadcast it. Chris French hosted a massive libel support event in London one day. The Scandinavian Skeptics. I remember Amadeo phoned me up while I was at an airport, Stansted Airport. I was in the car park, racing to get a plane. He called me up and said, look, whatever we can do to help, we'll put it on the European Skeptics website, we'll put it on the German Skeptics website, we'll get the voices of the skeptical movement showing their alarm at what's happening in England. Because this is very much an English problem that I was facing. And so positive things began to emerge. So, for example, doctors began to find out about chiropractic. Previously, they'd ignored it. They just let these people get on. They thought they were just physiotherapists. They didn't realize they were making these outrageous claims. So by me being sued, the scrutiny was being placed on the chiropractors. Also, you just heard about the complaints that were submitted against chiropractors. This is an article by Chris French, if you want to find out more, on the Guardian website. But a couple of skeptics, Simon Perry, who's speaking on Sunday, Alan Hennis, Maria McLachlan, started looking at these chiropractors, trying to find out how many of them were making outrageous claims about colic and ear infections and so on. And every time they found one of these claims, they submitted it to the Advertising Standards Agency, or they submitted it to the General Chiropractic Council. And the General Chiropractic Council used to get 20 complaints a year. In 1 month, they received 600 complaints. And what that meant, the skeptical community, just a few people within the skeptical community, had done more to hold this profession to account than everybody else had done for the past 20 years. And so this showed the power and the support and the friendship and the camaraderie and the activism that was out there in the skeptical community. So people started looking at chiropractic critically, people started complaining about chiropractic, and people started complaining about the libel laws. And this movement began to say, look, it's just wrong. Science and skepticism and rationalism and medicine and all sorts of other areas only progress if we can have healthy debate. People will stand up here over the next couple of weeks and they'll put forward ideas and other people will challenge them. And it's through that process of challenge and argument and debate that things move forward. And unless we can freely put forward our ideas, then it's not just us that suffers, but it's the whole of society. So it's not just about my right to free speech, it's about everybody else's right to hear what I've got to say, and what everyone else has to say as well. So this campaign started to reform the libel laws. And gradually it began to gather momentum and so on. And I'll come back to this a bit later. And the other thing I should stress is it wasn't just me being sued for libel. We've heard Ben Goldacre's name already today. He was being sued for libel for criticizing Matthias Rath, who was promoting the use of vitamins to treat HIV in South Africa. Henrik Thompson was a Danish radiographer being sued by an American company in London. This is this idea of libel tourism. If you want to shut people up, even if they're not British, you sue them in London because you can win in London. Francisco Lacerda was a Swedish academic, a linguist, who criticized an Israeli technology company over a supposed lie detector. His academic journal was sued in London. Peter Wilmshurst was sued, gave an interview in America to an American online magazine about an American company, talking to an American journalist, obviously gets sued in London. And bloggers, people like Andy Lewis, all sorts of cases were happening. So there was this growing concern, saying, look, I'm being sued, I'm being silenced. And this campaign grew, and there was an organization called libelreform.org. Richard Dawkins gave the first political speech about libel reform. Celebrities backed it, Nobel laureates backed it, the Astronomer Royal, the Poet Laureate, historians, consumer rights groups, human rights groups. But I should stress here, this is really important. The start of this campaign came from the skeptical community. It came from the bloggers and so on. This really started a movement. And within a few weeks, a few months, maybe even after 2 years, we've now got to a situation where in the UK, all 3 political parties support libel reform. And there's a bit more to that story, but I'll come back to that at the end. But there's a campaign, and if you haven't signed up, please do still sign up. We had people signing up from around the world, and we still welcome more people. Libelreform.org, please do add your voice. But I'll come back to this a bit later. I just want to talk about one thing that happened more recently. And it concerns this lady here. This is Psychic Sally. She is our most famous psychic in Britain. And a lovely lady, she has an extraordinary gift. And she has a huge following. She has a massive TV show, so she gets a massive audience in the UK, and she tours the country. And these are major venues. These are massive venues. They're 1,000 to 2,000 seater venues. So, and she stands up on a stage, she does these readings, and I've seen 4 of her shows, and I find them very distressing. She really manipulates her audience. I feel, maybe I'll take that back. But just on another good side, because again, sometimes these talks can get depressing and so on. She's filling 2,000-seater venues, but Skepticism in Britain is filling 3,000-seater venues. I did a show last year with Ben Goldacre and Brian Cox, who you've already heard about, and a chap called Robin Ince, who's a comedian who's interested in science. And we did 23 shows and met 40,000 skeptics, nerds, geeks, whoever we are. And so we were filling massive rock and roll venues. And this again, it shows the enthusiasm that skepticism can garner. But back to the bad side, back to Sally. So Sally's, she's charging £25 a ticket, 1,000-seater audience, 5 nights a week, TV show, massive money spinner. And then something odd happened about 8 or 9 months ago. She was doing a show in Dublin. And after the show in Dublin, 3 people from the audience independently rang up a radio station. And they said they were at the very back of the auditorium and they could hear a voice. And the voice would say, David Payne in back. And then 5 seconds later, she would say, David Payne in the back. And it seemed as though she was being fed messages, a kind of Peter Popoff style, from the back of the theatre. And Chris French wrote an article about this. Psychic Sally hears voices from the other side via an earpiece. This was the suggestion. Was she getting messages via an earpiece? And there was lots of coverage in newspapers and TV and so on. And this was interesting because for the first time, the general population were critically assessing, is this woman genuine or not? And I drew this graph. I did some analysis. I'm a bit low tech still. But these are her reviews. You can go online, you can post a review of the show. And before the event happened around here when the supposed earpiece story broke. Before that, her reviews are 4.5 stars. After that date, her reviews plummeted. Now, one theory is that she was using an earpiece and she removed the earpiece after September because she'd been rattled and therefore her readings went down and therefore her reviews went down. Obviously, I wouldn't speculate at that. Somebody else speculated that maybe the ghosts and the spirits go into hibernation around this time. So this was, again, it's just interesting. It doesn't prove anything, but it adds something to the story. And then this chap came along, Drew McAdam. And he went to see a show of hers in Edinburgh. And he was sat quite near the front row, and there was a message for him. Sally had a message for him. And the message was about a gentleman called Toby who'd been killed in a bomb explosion. And Drew took the reading, and it was the most remarkable reading of the whole night because it was quite a dramatic death. What Drew then revealed was that before the show, he had emailed her the information. He'd written notes, left them in what she calls her love letter box. So he'd given her all the information she needed to give that reading. Now, that doesn't prove anything because maybe despite all of that information, the spirits were talking to Sally. Except it turns out that Toby wasn't a real person. Toby was a character from a BBC drama called, Doomwatch, from the 1970s. And it was a fictional accident to a fictional character and a fictional TV series. It never happened. And yet somehow, Psychic Sally was able to contact this fictional character. Again, it doesn't prove anything, but it raises suspicions. And then this chap came on. This is Paul Zenon. He's a magician, an illusionist, I should say, and an entertainer in Britain, and a good skeptic, interested in these issues. When all of this was happening, he wrote an article. And it was in the Daily Mail, and he said, what a load of crystal balls. As Diana's former, I should have said she was Diana's psychic, Princess Diana's psychic, is accused of cheating on stage, a TV illusionist exposes how trickery can fool any audience. And he talked about all the tricks somebody might use in order to give the impression they're psychic. He wrote a whole article, it was fascinating, still online, you can still read it. But then the problems occurred because Psychic Sally sued him for libel. And we're back to this problem, that libel can still be used in England to shut people up. And Paul is being sued for libel, and her lawyer is shutting up debate on this issue. I know because I've heard from him. I did 3 radio interviews, 2 of them with the BBC. And they said, we want to talk to you because you're challenging Psychic Sally. JREF were helping us with the challenge of Psychic Sally, which Sally declined. So this radio station said, we want to talk to you because Sally's performing locally. We want to talk to you because you're offering this psychic challenge to Sally. We want to have you on the air. We want to interview you. But for God's sake, do not mention Psychic Sally's name. And this is the fear that libel can instill in you. We had an article that was going to run in a newspaper. They pulled the article because a lawyer had said to them they ought to be a bit concerned about what they were publishing. Her lawyer tried to threaten me. I received 3 emails from her lawyer saying that I shouldn't be writing blogs about her or posts about her. He stopped emailing me when I put his emails online and corrected his grammar. Lawyers do not like that. They do not like that. So we're kind of back to where we started. I got sued for libel. They tried to silence me, but with the support from people like you, it didn't work on me. Now they're suing Paul, and we're trying to support Paul and get him through all of this. But there's good news. Things will change. And I'm confident of that because literally just a week ago, we had what in England is called the Queen's Speech, which happens about once a year or every 2 years, where the Queen reads her speech, which is written for her by the Prime Minister. And she sets out what the government wants to achieve over the next year or 2 years. And in that speech, there was a promise to have a defamation bill, a libel reform bill. And it's a real pleasure here to be, 1, to receive this award, but 2, to tell everybody here, because you've really genuinely been part of it. What everybody has done in the skeptical movement has genuinely helped change freedom of speech in Britain. And because our laws are used to shut up other people, I think what we've done as a community is change free speech laws around the world. Thank you very, very much for listening. Thank you.
The World Skeptics Congress, Paranormal, Supernatural, Fringe Science, Pseudoscience, and How It Really Is.
We're skeptically interrogating